Paul Gauguin, writing to Paul Seroussier. How do you see these trees? They are yellow, so put in yellow. This shadow, rather blue, paint it with pure ultramarine. These red leaves, put in vermilion. Saturated. A poem from Bermuda. Saturated. Fauvist. The colors, the couleur-ness, the saturated abstractions, expressions of the walls, the water, the stalks, fronds, flowers, the high noon, late day shadows. Everywhere, shades of Matisse, brushes of Derain, Gauguin, Vlaminck, rushes of sun, wildly fresh images, wet and drying canvases. Welcome everyone to the 25th Floating Poetry broadcast in this weekly series, coming to you live again from Rhode Island, by the sea, the vivid sea. I'm delighted you're leaning in from near and far, coast to coast, some of you countries away. This is Colin Goedecke, your poet and poetorialist, inviting you this week to contemplate living colorfully, or more colorfully. In living in your full colors, expressing and presenting yourself to the world at large, painting yourself onto the canvas of your days and daily life, visually to gesturally to verbally, and seeing your own self more colorfully, beholding the surprising, often inspiring range of color, pigments, tints, and hues to discover of your emotional life, your imagination, conversations, dreams, pure nature, much more. For me, as a being, and especially as a poet, the colorless or uncolored life is not worth living. Only the vivid, the color-rich, the fullest spectrum I can achieve, I can embrace, engage. So let's dip our brushes into some thoughts on our theme, then into a palette, if you will, of chosen poems. Living colorfully. Well, are you revealing all your color? Your true colors? If not, why not? If not now, when? Who's the most colorful person you know in your social circles? And who would you say is a colorful character in the wider world for you? Well, for me, it's a handful of friends and figures of more knownness, like Walt Whitman for his vibrant spirit and language, Errol Flynn for his savoir-faire, on screen and off, Cary Grant for his one-of-a-kind style, Salvador Dali for his outre persona and mustache, and there's Pablo Picasso, Frida Kahlo, Oscar Wilde in his wit, Orson Welles at his height. People who were full on their own man or woman, fiercely individual, brilliantly individual, no matter what. What parts of you have the most color? What facets of your life are wonderfully or especially colorful, are calling for expression? Past experiences, what of those? What encounters come to mind when you think of colorfulness? What associations arise? What about the landscape of your imagination, your dreamscape, or literal landscapes, whether jungles, mountains, oceans, sunsets? Looking at paintings, listening to music, cooking, or eating. I was thinking about this theme, and I remember when my life changed dramatically, became colorized when I grew up eating suburban cuisine, I guess we could call it, at the nicest. Very simple, not too much spice or anything untoward. And I came into a married life and full of Italians and fantastic cooks and food. And I described it as the moment, like in The Wizard of Oz, where the film goes from black and white to color, and suddenly this bursting open of flavor, of expansive tastes, and it was just, that was color for me. That was an incredible amount of color that washed in. And then what about dressing? How we present ourselves, the way we costume ourselves, or just the times when you're simply walking about or traveling to fresh places or going out in nature. How observant, engaged are you with the colors of things and the play of colors together? Yes, actual colors too, and what spontaneous feelings they conjure, deeper, subtler emotions they bring up inside you and maybe surprise you with. Which ones invite you? Which colors animate you, delight you, or disconcert you? Maybe even describe your personality if you had to describe it. What might the lead color be and why? For me, living colorfully isn't, and for many of us, it's not just about brightness or panache. It takes in, it drinks in, and reflects out the whole spectrum. Often far more than we may realize is possible, is livable. Now, I feel it's all worth inviting, worth opening ourselves into. So, hence our theme tonight, and now some poems, and one more thought before we get to those is some more thoughts by some others. John O'Donohue, who I've brought in, wonderful, from his book Beauty, marvelous book, and there's a whole section on colors and sort of deeper meanings and essences and feeling places of colors. Beauty, the invisible embrace. He says the presence and experience of color is at the very heart of human life. In a sense, we are created for a life full of color. When we attend to color and light, our souls are fed. Color is the language of light. Light is the greatest unnoticed force of transfiguration in the world. It literally alters everything it touches, and through color dresses nature to delight, befriend, inspire, and shelter us. The miracle of color is a testament to the diverse, precise, and ever-surprising beauty of the primal imagination. As Goethe said, the eye needs color as much as it needs light. Thank you, John O'Donohue. Terry Tempest Williams, and I think I've called her in once before, but she made a visit to the Big Bend National Park in Texas, and she wanted to experience the Chihuahuan Desert, and she took small notebooks, and each was devoted to a different color each day of her time there. And this is the notebook that talked about blue. Day one, blue is bunting, indigo, and quick. Blue is jay, it's chatter like jazz. Blue is grosbeak, is bluebird, is blackbird turned sky. The Jesus Mountains at dusk are blue. Blue is ghost-like, twilight, deep border blue. Once is the blue moon where panthers dance. Twice is the blue belly of lizards flashing. Blue waves are heat waves, dervishes in sand. Blue is the long song of storm clouds gathering with rain. And the beautiful on blueness. Ralph Waldo Emerson, in A General Theory of Love, said, dream delivers us to dream, and there is no end to illusion. Life is a train of moods like a string of beads, and as we pass through them, they prove to be many colored lenses which paint the world their own hue. Temperament is the iron wire on which the beads are strung. Like that. You might like that too. There's a poet, Mary Rifle, and she's newer to me, but when I was doing some research on our theme and things that I maybe hadn't come across in her collection, wonderful collection called My Private Property, she talks about the color spectrum of sadnesses and what each sadness relates to a different color for her. Green, I just pulled that one out. Green sadness is sadness dressed for graduation. It is the sadness of June, of shiny toasters as they come out of their boxes, the table laid before a party, the smell of new strawberries and dripping roasts about to be devoured. It is the sadness of the unperceived and therefore never felt and seldom expressed, except on occasion by polka dancers and little girls who, in imitation of their grandmothers, decide who shall have their bunny when they die. Green sadness weighs no more than an unused handkerchief. It is the funeral silence of bones beneath the green carpet of evenly cut grass upon which the bride and groom walk. Enjoy. How about that? Interesting. She also said at the end note of that very book, The End Matter, which no one really ever looks at, or almost never, she writes, in each of the color pieces, if you substitute the word happiness for the word sadness, nothing changes. So, I mentioned food before, and I thought of who would be like one of the most not obvious colorful figures around food and eating and ingenious and inventive things to do with that. Wildly colorful things was the futurist way back in time, in 32, in the 30s. His name was Filippo Marinetti, and he wrote the Futurist Cookbook. I actually have a copy floating around somewhere. 11 Rules for a Perfect Meal and an Anti-Pasta Manifesto. It's absolutely outrageous, and partly because he wanted to be outrageous, but he outlined the requirements for the ideal meal, futurist meal, and I'll just read you a couple of them. They're not all of them. Absolute originality in the food. The use of music limited to the intervals between courses so as not to distract the sensitivity of the tongue and palate, but to help annul the last taste enjoyed by reestablishing gustatory virginity. The abolition of speech-making in politics at the table. Well, I say here to that, always. The use in prescribed doses of poetry and music as surprise ingredients to accentuate the flavors of a given dish with their sensual intensity. Well, I don't think I was thinking about him at the time, but I have put forth, over time, commissioned and my own self sort of initiated poetry on the plate, immersive experiences of eating that and weave in poetry and imagery and anecdotes and interesting conversations with the food. That's all themed to some one theme it all plays to. And everybody who's experienced them over time, they're all very different. So they've never been to any such thing before. So Marinetti, Futurist Cookbook, have a peek at that sometime. There is a remote Indian village, and every person's name is a song. It's the village of Kong Thong. The songs, they call to each other using short tunes that resemble bird song. The songs act as a second name for each villager and are used more frequently than a real name. It's called, I'll do my best on this, is Jing Rwai Lobai, which translates to Song of the Clan's First Woman. They sing their children in to eat. They rhapsodize to find each other in the jungle. How colorful, I thought, is that? I'd heard about that before, and I looked it up again. All right, so some poems as we go through the colorations of life and living and the world and nature and our insides and outsides. So this is the one I did not read. Last time around I read a different autumnal equinox poem, but I do want to honor the equinox, and this is fitting for the theme, I feel. And so here it is. The fall is not a falling or be falling, but an arriving of a different season of lightfulness, of fruitfulness, as abundant as the preceding, now gracefully, still greenly receding summer. If cooler, if drier, is another calling to our senses, sense memories, to another feast of nature's further best. And this day, day of equinox, day of equal light and dark, shared long and short, from Hagar Quim to Yantar Mantar, Stonehenge, this time of Mabon, Mien Fomer, Shubunnohi, harvest moons, mooncakes, and lanterns, brightly beheld auroras to the north, asters and mums to the south. A day to feel a great balance, needed balance, shed heaviness of body, uneasiness of heart, fine reverence for the sun, the stars, all life on earth, frisk into the air, color and root flavors of autumn, and prepare for the deep downy quieting of the coming winter, the fall. And for those of us who are entering it together in this hemisphere, it's, for me, always marvelous and crisp and sparkling and fresh and invigorating. Galway Canal, Vermont man, poet, not with us anymore in physical body, but always in the molecules. This is from his Mortal Acts, Mortal Words. So on this sort of the idea of the living color of nature, the living color, the aliveness of that. Daybreak is his poem on the tidal mud. Just before sunset, dozens of starfishes were creeping. It was as though the mud were a sky, and enormous, imperfect stars moved across it as slowly as the actual stars cross heaven. All at once they stopped, and as if they had simply increased their receptivity to gravity, they sank down into the mud. They faded down into it and lay still, and by the time pink of sunset broke across them, they were as invisible as the true stars at daybreak. Lovely. Thank you, Galway Canal. We're not the only beholders of the colors of the world, of the universe, of everything. But thinking on that, I wrote this piece back in time called Painted Sunsets. Yes, painted sunsets are for people to paint or praise, yet also for the animals, from the hawks to the horses, that add their own color to the hills and valleys that every western sun falls to sleep in, who also fill their eyes with great painted wonder. I'd mentioned at the start about our dreamscape and the colors, colorations, and colorfulness, and that happens in many of our dreams. I seem to somehow always dream in Technicolor. It's pretty wild and wonderful. And this is a poem by Michelle Wolf. Actually, it was a poem chosen for Feast of the Gypsies. It was the Poetry on the Plate dinner I'd put together for actually 24 people back about a year or so ago. And this poem was from that moment, but before that, The Sleeping Gypsy. In the heat of her dream, she hears the iron kettle boiling, its scuttle and hum as hurried as hoofbeats across a plain. She drops in 2 guinea hens. Dancing in a ring round her skirts, the children cheer, "Auntie, the English song." Lifting her lute, she sings of the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumping over the moon. How the little ones hoot when the dish runs away with the spoon. Ah, spoon, an uncloaked lute, it waits to be strummed. The temptation of London, of Paris, of bumping along in the carriage with Monsieur Philippe in his top hat and greatcoat to visit the peacocks, turquoise and gold and green, each roaming the Bois de Boulogne with 100 eyes. She sleeps in the desert under a smiling full moon that shines in the teal night. Quiet behind her, a lion stands, tail erect, having sniffed at her onyx flesh, at the ribbony stripes. His color blindness darkens on her muslin dress, all rainbow hues. She is lost in a dream, always happiest out of doors, without shoes. Michelle Wolf, The Sleeping Gypsy. And she was riffing on a famous painting by Henri Rousseau. There's a sleeping woman in a striped dress and a lion standing there. Quite marvelous. So, turning the dial a bit to people, as we spoke also about, or I did, and their sometimes hidden or not fully revealed colors that we can discover and honor and bring some reverence to, whether they're with us anymore or not. And I think about those pigments of people are not always apparent until we experience more of them. And the poet Mary Oliver had a beautiful life partner, Molly Cook, and for a very long time, and then Molly passed away and ultimately did marry, but not right off. And she, apropos, wrote this once about that relationship and about that woman who she called M. In openness and empathy was necessary if the attention was to matter. Such openness and empathy M had in abundance and gave away freely. I was in my late 20s and early 30s and well filled with a sense of my own thoughts, my own presence. I was eager to address the world of words, to address the world with words. Then M instilled in me this deeper level of looking and working, of seeing through the heavenly visibles to the heavenly invisibles. I think of this always when I look at her photographs, the images of vitality, hopefulness, endurance, kindness, vulnerability. We each had our separate natures, yet our ideas, our influences upon each other became a rich and abiding confluence. So what about the confluence of colors that happens with others into our colors, and what new colors are formed when we come together with different people, friends, partners, lovers, colleagues? I mean, think about that. I've had the good fortune to know many truly colorful characters, past and present. Here are a few, and I've called out and celebrated, and will always celebrate them. And these are my ways of touchstones back to them as well, especially those who have passed away or passed out of my life. This was a remarkable fellow, Bob Brinker. I hope he's still out there. Actually, maybe he's listening. I'll see if I can find him. And then this is called Bwana Bob. A scoop of Bob Hope in the bullseye of his face, blended with a John Wayne frame, long white mane and Falstaffian laugh, an alpha uber maleness, a taste for fine racehorses like King Kugat, and exotic birds like the turquoise-browed mot-mot sighted among Mayan ruins, and Puccini and East African safaris via his Man Friday in Nairobi, swimming with herds of wild game, this larger-than-life character, old hand enough to be known as Tusker or Bwana Bob, and something else, unpronounceable, in Bhutan, where the native children marveled at his big-shouldered, broad-chested, bright blue-eyed white man, this cosmic, charismatic figure from another time, passing indelibly through ours. This is from my soul sister, Rachel Menard, out in San Francisco, smoky San Francisco. I hope the smoke is giving way finally so everybody can breathe easier, literally and otherwise. This was written on her 48th birthday 3 years ago. When we slice the cake is this one. When we slice the cake of your life, a day, a decade, this year, we find generous layers of loveliness, adventurousness, industriousness. We taste a delicious way of being, a filling of jammy joie de vivre. We give thanks for getting to share in all the present and preceding courses, all the next great feasts and most just desserts of you, still to come. So, there's all the colors that we do have yet to emerge, not just the ones that we haven't revealed, but all the ones that we haven't even come to yet because they're still forming. There's one more. This was for a once true love. It's called You Green. The color between blue and yellow, between sapphire night and sunbrush day, on the spectrum of your visible, indivisible light, the color of your grasses, your feathers, your leaves, your living eyes, your underwater dreams. In old Thai, Chinese, Japanese, the same word, blue or green. In ancient Greece, the same color of undulating sea, of ruffling trees. Democritus described a pale chloron green, a leek prasinon green, while Aristotle saw it midway between black, earth, and white, water, while I see it in celadon and sea foam, your tidal-pooled spirit, soul. Behold your green earth, your fireworking green sparks, lush vegetation, green vigor, wild green growth. The color of Venus you share, two great goddesses of gardens and vineyards, sacred valleys, two shades of deepening desire, of spring, summer, serpentine, all graced, all ripe, respiring, renewing, the remarkable, heart-chakred harmony, indelible hue of you. You green. I was sparked by a writer, some of you may know Edmund White, once who felt that a city, in his case Paris, which he spent a lot of time in, was a color to him, and how that was shifting and more emotional than actual, literal. And I riffed on that. I thought that's also something we might want to think about wherever we live. What kind of coloration, not literally, but emotionally, is that place that we're in, if it's a city or a town. So this is called The Color of Cities. Edmund White, would-be flaneur, pronounces Paris has gone from white to black, brown and yellow. If so, what shades have the other cities changed to? New York, mercury to cobalt blue, London, gray to amber, Rome, olive to eggplant. Color of cities. Then Mexico, always a colorful place, especially when I was there in the winters, and there in the Yucatan on the Mayan coast. Moving color, move the spirit and the imagination. Colores primarios, primary colors, burnt orange, on pine, on plaster, on azure. Bird, tree, cloud, sky. So colors as touchstones too. Feeling places, memories, people, imaginations, conversations. One summer, just a moment of a thread of color that had a lot of feeling to it. A ripe rind of moon on a bed of violet sky, firefly night, candlelight, a ripe rind of moon on a bed of violet. Feeling states, color and feeling states, they can summon so much. I spent 2 different Augusts in the Aegean on an ancient island, Kea, in the Cyclades, and this happened there, under the arbor. Under the arbor, heavy with fruit, drowsy with late summer sun, eyes half open, limbs akimbo like the vines, ripe fruit clusters inside rose blush skin, inside dust purple skin, under the grape-leafed arbor. So, winding out, as we always seem to suddenly we're coming to a close, I felt we had to hear from our man, poet Lawrence Ferlinghetti, about painting our way into life and onto life and into living, especially those unpainted parts which want us to paint ourselves on them. And this is his instructions to painters and poets, but to all of us. I asked 100 painters and 100 poets how to paint sunlight on the face of life. Their answers were ambiguous and ingenuous, as if they were all guarding trade secrets, whereas it seems to me, all you have to do is conceive of the whole world and all humanity as a kind of artwork, a site-specific artwork, an art project of the God of light, the whole earth and all that's in it to be painted with light. And the first thing you have to do is paint out postmodern painting. And the next thing is to paint yourself in your true colors, in primary colors as you see them, without whitewash. Paint yourself as you see yourself, without makeup, without masks. Then paint your favorite people and animals with your brush loaded with light. And be sure you get the perspective right and don't fake it, because one false line leads to another. And don't forget to paint all those who live their lives as bearers of light. Paint their eyes, and the eyes of every animal, and the eyes of beautiful women, known best for the perfection of their breasts, and the eyes of men and women known only for the light of their minds. Paint the light of their eyes, the light of sunlit laughter, the song of eyes, the song of birds in flight, and remember that the light is within if it is anywhere, and you must paint from the inside. Thank you, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. That's from How to Paint Sunlight. It's his collection. So, next to the end, a thought from our man, Walt Whitman. That indelible man, Walt Whitman. This is what you shall do. Love the earth and sun and the animals. Despise riches, give alms to everyone that asks, stand up for the stupid and crazy, devote your income and labor to others, hate tyrants, argue not concerning God, have patience and indulgence toward the people, take off your hat to nothing, known or unknown, or to any man or number of men, go freely with powerful, uneducated persons and with the young and with the mothers of families. Read these leaves in the open air every season of every year of your life. Re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face and between the lashes of your eyes and in every motion and joint of your body. Thank you, Walt Whitman. Always thanks to him. And last, a poem for us, Fountain Penning. Other writers, devotees like me, of old style stylographs, remember oceans of ink flowing for hours, days, years, like bright blue water, onto smooth white stretches of paper, waving, tide pooling, scrolling hieroglyphically in our own quirky calligraphies, new poems, paeans, love letters, notes to self, each pen rightly, delightedly a wellhead, through whose gold and silver spouts we fountained out delible and indelible impressions, sensations, musings of the heart, head, spirit, the marvels of our seeing, being, believing, becoming. Thanks again, each of you, all of you, for floating in, and in these pandemically shaky times, supporting these programs and poetic arts with your donations. All contributions are welcome and easily made by PayPal and Venmo and directly through my site. I also welcome other support from private artist residencies like the one I'm winding up soon here, to helping fund one of the compelling experiential art projects I'm shaping. Your comments and questions are always encouraged, and sharing how these broadcasts touch you. The best gift of all is your enthusiasm in turning others on to these broadcasts. All the replays are online. Do come and lean in again. Until then, dear listeners, good days ahead, days of living colorfully, more vividly, and good spirits.